Right now, somewhere, a CEO is making more before lunch than most of their employees make in a year. You already have a reaction to that sentence. Notice it, because that reaction is the actual subject of this video, not the paycheck. Most people hear a number like that and feel something close to certainty. Obviously, it's unfair. Obviously, no single person's work is worth that much more than everyone else's. But the real debate is far messier than that, and it isn't really about the number at all. It's about why your brain decided almost instantly that the number was wrong. So here's the real question. Is executive pay actually unjustified, or does it just feel unjustified, and are those the same thing? Let's start with the strongest case for why the gap might be earned. Executives aren't paid for the hours they work. They're paid for the size of the decisions they make. A single bad call on pricing, on a merger, on which factory to build, can cost a company more money than an average employee will earn across their entire career. If a leader's choices swing outcomes by tens of millions of dollars, even a small improvement in judgment is worth a lot in dollar terms. That's the core logic behind high executive pay. You're not paying for effort, you're paying for leverage. There's also a structural argument, and it comes from an idea in labor economics called tournament theory, developed by the economist Edward Lazier. The idea is simple once you see it. Companies often can't measure exactly how good any one manager is. What they can do is rank people and reward whoever comes out on top, the way a tournament rewards the winner of a match, rather than paying out for how well someone played. And here's the strange part. When outcomes are shaped partly by luck and partly by skill, you sometimes need a bigger prize at the top to keep everyone trying hard, because a modest reward isn't enough to motivate effort when the result is noisy. The economist and writer Tim Harford has discussed this reasoning in his work, using it to explain why some pay gaps that look excessive on the surface may be functioning as an incentive structure rather than a simple reward for output. That doesn't settle whether it's fair, it just explains why a company might rationally choose it anyway. And there's scarcity. Genuinely great leadership, the kind that can turn around a failing company or scale a fragile one without breaking it, is rare. Rare things get expensive. That's true of paintings, of real estate, of talent. Put together, side A isn't greed. It's leverage, incentive design, and scarcity. Now the other side, and it's just as serious. The first problem is the disconnect between pay and performance. Multiple studies over the years have found only a loose relationship between how much a CEO is paid and how their company actually performs afterward. If pay were purely a reward for value created, you'd expect that link to be tight. In many cases, it isn't, which raises an uncomfortable question. If pay isn't tracking performance that closely, what is it tracking? Part of the answer may be social comparison rather than individual output. Boards that set executive pay often benchmark against what similar companies pay their executives, which can push pay upward across an entire industry even when performance stays flat. The economist Robert Frank has written about this kind of dynamic under the banner of what he calls winner-take-all competition, where the reward for being ranked highest keeps rising even as the actual gap in skill between the top and the middle stays small. That's not a story about any one person deserving less. It's a story about a system where rewards can drift upward independent of merit. Then there's the fairness question, and this is where it stops being purely an economics problem and becomes a values problem. Even people who accept that leverage and scarcity are real still ask whether any single individual's contribution can be 1,000 times more valuable than the person keeping the factory floor running, or the nurse working a night shift, or the teacher managing 30 kids alone. That's not a question data can answer for you, it's a question about what kind of society you think is just, and reasonable people land in very different places on it. So why does your gut react so fast before you've weighed any of this? Some of it comes down to fairness psychology. In a well-known set of studies, the psychologist Daniel Kahneman, working with Jack Knetch and Richard Thaler, found that people don't just care about outcomes. They care about whether the process behind those outcomes feels fair. A company raising prices during a shortage might be economically rational, but people still call it exploitative if it feels like someone is taking advantage of a moment rather than earning a reward. Executive pay triggers the same instinct. It's not only, is this number too big? It's, does this number feel like it was extracted rather than earned? There's also a bias at play that's easy to miss because it hides inside your certainty. The just world tendency, a pattern researchers have studied in social psychology since the late 1960s, is the pull toward believing that outcomes are basically deserved, that winners must have earned it, and by the same logic, that people struggling must be lacking something. This cuts in two directions here. It can make you defend an unequal outcome because they must have earned it. Or it can make you reject an unequal outcome because it violates the sense that effort and reward should line up. Which direction you lean often has less to do with the CEO in question and more to do with which version of the world should make sense you were raised to believe. And moral emotion moves faster than moral reasoning. You don't calculate your way into outrage, you feel it, and then your reasoning shows up afterward to justify what you already decided. That's not a flaw unique to you. It's closer to how human moral judgment generally works according to decades of research in moral psychology. The number in the headline isn't just information, it's a trigger. So which lens is right, the economist's or the instinctive one? Here's the honest answer, and it's not a satisfying one. Both can be true at the same time. A pay structure can be internally rational from inside a company's incentive design and still produce an outcome that most people, using a completely reasonable definition of fairness, would call unjust. Economics can explain why a system exists without settling whether the system should exist. That's not a dodge. That's the actual shape of the disagreement. Philosophers have a name for part of this split. It's the difference between a desert-based view of fairness, where you deserve what you contribute, and a needs-based or equality-based view, where extreme gaps are a problem regardless of contribution. Because a functioning society depends on people not falling too far below each other. Neither view is obviously wrong. They're just answering different questions. One is asking, did this person earn it? The other is asking, is this the kind of gap a healthy society can sustain? Which means the CEO pay debate was never really one debate. It was always at least two tangled together. An empirical one about whether pay tracks performance, where the evidence is genuinely mixed and worth staying skeptical about specific numbers you see quoted online. And a values one about how much inequality a fair system should tolerate, where no amount of additional data will hand you a final answer, because it isn't a data question. So the next time you see a headline with a shocking pay ratio in it, the useful question isn't, is this number too high? It's which of my two reactions is doing the talking right now, the part of me weighing incentives, or the part of me that just wants the world to make sense. Somewhere right now, that CEO is still making more before lunch than most people make in a year. You still have a reaction to that. This time, you know a little more about where it's coming from.